By the time I got home, it was already dark outside, so for a second I didn't register that the house was dark inside too. I unlocked the front door, stepped into a dead hallway, and instinctively reached for a switch that did nothing. No hum from the refrigerator, no thermostat light. No charging indicator from the lamp beside the couch, just silence. I stood there longer than I should have, still holding my keys, trying to fit this into a normal category. Storm outage, missed bill, neighborhood issue. I looked through the front window. Every house across the street was lit. Mine looked abandoned. I called the utility company while walking back to the car because my phone battery was low, and somehow that detail irritated me more than the blackout itself. The woman who answered verified my name, address, and account number. Then she said, in the practice-neutral tone people use when reading from a screen, "Your service was disconnected today per customer closure request." I actually thought she had the wrong account. "No," I said. "I'm looking at the house right now." "Yes, sir. The account was closed." Not interrupted. Closed by who? By the customer. I sat down in the driver's seat. "I am the customer." There was a pause, more typing. Then she explained that the request had been completed by phone earlier that afternoon and confirmed through email authorization. I opened my inbox. There it was waiting for me. Confirmation of permanent service termination, my full legal name, my address, a callback number listed under customer verification, not my number. I stared at it, and what surprised me most was not the shock, it was recognition. That same dull internal drop I used to feel when I came home from college and found my room rearranged because my mother needed the space better organized, or when my father called my landlord once, years ago, asking whether I was really on the lease by myself. They had always treated privacy like a clerical oversight. Even after I moved out, there was this assumption that adulthood was a phase I was performing badly. 3 weeks earlier, my mother had asked why I was wasting money proving a point by living alone. I hadn't answered. Apparently, silence had been interpreted as challenge. The representative offered to submit a reconnection order, standard restoration time, 1 to 2 business days. I looked at the black house. "No," I said. "I need the office that processed this." She gave me the local service center address. I drove there with no speech prepared, which was unusual for me. My parents and I had spent years having the same circular arguments where facts dissolved into guilt before they reached the table. This felt different. Not because I was brave. Because I was tired enough to want paperwork more than catharsis. The office was nearly closed. A man at the counter took my ID, printed the termination email, and clicked through the account history while I waited. At first, his face held the same polite detachment everyone in customer service wears. Then he stopped scrolling, went back, read something again. He leaned closer to the monitor. "Sir," he said, "did you personally call this in today?" "No." He nodded once, slowly, and opened another internal screen. I watched his expression change from routine to concern. "There are verification notes attached." He didn't explain immediately. He called a supervisor over. The supervisor read in silence, then asked for my driver's license again, this time comparing every detail. I remember how strange it was that nobody in that room looked skeptical anymore. Nobody suggested maybe a family member had handled it on my behalf. Nobody smiled in that minimizing way people do when they think domestic conflict is just emotional clutter. The supervisor finally said, "The caller failed the original callback verification. They provided a substitute number and insisted the prior contact was outdated." My chest tightened. That was exactly the kind of thing my mother would say. Not panicked, not uncertain, but offended that procedure existed at all. He kept reading. "There are also override notes because the caller claimed urgent relocation." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Not anger, something flatter, so this had taken effort, persistence, planning. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment tantrum. This was administration. The supervisor turned the monitor slightly and tapped a line item. "Sir, this should have been flagged as unauthorized. We're escalating it to fraud review now." That was the moment everything shifted, not internally, externally. Up until then, this had still carried the old family contamination. The possibility that I was overreacting, that maybe I should just call them, that maybe this was another ugly misunderstanding. But once another employee joined, then another. Once forms came out and they started using phrases like identity misuse and unauthorized account closure, it no longer belonged to family interpretation, it belonged to record. I signed statements, confirmed contact information, added a security password to the account. They expedited emergency restoration and gave me an incident reference number in case I wanted to file a broader identity complaint, wanted to, as if deciding whether my parents should remain merely intrusive or become officially documented. I sat in my car afterward holding that little printed slip, the lights from the office reflected on the windshield in long pale bars. I thought about calling my mother just to hear whether she would deny it immediately or explain it as concern. But suddenly I didn't care which script she chose. Both would mean the same thing. They still believed access to me was theirs by default. When I got back home, the power had been restored, the porch light was on. The kitchen clock blinked. The heater clicked softly alive. The house looked normal again, which felt almost insulting. I walked inside and set my keys on the counter. Nothing in the room had changed, but the category had. My parents were no longer difficult, controlling, over-involved, manipulative. Whatever softer family words I had spent years rotating through, they were now people I needed to secure my identity against. And that realization was colder than the dark house had been.